That's more than malaria, HIV, and TB combined. It talks about surgical site infections, which comprises about 38% of all post-surgical infections. It is a big problem. It's big numbers here. It started getting me thinking about how big the problem was. And what I was doing wasn't solving anything. I thought about the patient journey a little bit more, and I realized, in reality, patients actually spend a few days in front of clinicians. You know, when you see them, you spend time trying to decide if they need surgery or not, and then you go through the whole, you know, booking them in for surgery, having that day of surgery, following them up, and maybe you throw in a couple of days of complications, and you see them about 5-10 days in a year. The rest of the time, they're recovering at home. I had no insight into patients when they were at home. I saw them at those windows of opportunity in clinics, or whenever I saw them in a clinical setting. This wasn't very helpful for me because I realized patients were getting problems or infections or complications far away from me, and I was reacting. This was a reactive experience. Everything what I did was reaction. There was no proactivity to it, there was no prediction to it. I had no control. And as an orthopedic surgeon, that's a difficult place to be. So we decided to design this ecosystem, post-op. Post-op is all about making the whole surgical journey more transparent, more visible. I think there is supposed to be sound. There you go. It's not just in my head. I had to play that video because it's really nice. The whole point of post-op was to look at the surgical pathway through different eyes. I mean, I always saw this through the eyes of the surgeon, but we can look at it in a different way, through the eyes of the patient. And I'll tell you why that is important. I mean, traditionally we've seen patients and we follow the pathway, as we call it. We operate on them, we send them home, we follow them up in clinics to keep an eye on them. But everything is reactive. Imagine a world where everything is proactive. Imagine a world where we have oversight of the patient's recovery process. Would that mean that we can plan our clinics better? Could we identify problems before they happen? Could it be more engaging for the patients? Because we all know that better engaged patients have better outcomes, right? The post-op app was designed so that it could be really interactive for patients and really fun, because if they don't cooperate with you, you don't have really much of a hope. Imagine patients being sent home and asked to do physiotherapy exercises. They probably don't, or maybe they've been given a sheet of paper. They've got access to resources there that they can use that is really friendly and quite fun to play around with. Imagine what it means to you as clinicians. All that real-time data with insights, with artificial intelligence or whatever it is, all that information available to you when you need it. When you're in a clinic situation, you have a patient coming in, you don't have to ask them how their last 6 weeks have been. You know how the last 6 weeks have been. You can act on the information you have already. You can plan with them. You can even have time to listen
in
to
this
them.
slide, visualize the details it is cut.
Things that we've always tried to do, but with limited time, we have to sacrifice sometimes as we rush through clinics or theatre sessions. The future of patient experience, as I see it, is a hybrid. A hybrid between digital tools like this and our own current physical touch points. You know, we have clinic settings where we use intelligent use of clinic time with tools such as this to truly interact with patients. And patients get feedback as well. You know, I always think about the word healthcare, the words healthcare delivery. It puts a lot of onus on us to deliver that healthcare. Why don't we start thinking about healthcare partnerships? Where the patients and us, we are in a partnership. Where we have shared responsibility, we have shared information. It is so much nicer, so much less stressful for both. We can actually use our time better. Postop is an evolving platform, so every patient in every specialty is different. In fact, every patient in each specialty is different. Everyone has their needs, their nuanced needs, which we need to address. And one of the things we can do is digitally enhance those needs we can provide in different specialties. We started in orthopedics, we're now rolling it out in general surgery and to other specialties. I always think about appendicitis, for example. It's very intriguing. I mean, you can have an appendectomy in London or New York or Mumbai. It's more or less the same procedure. It's done the same way, right? But why is the patient's experience so different in all these places? Why can't it be the same? Why can't it be standardized? It should be. You know, we've got pockets of good practice, we've got pockets of not so good practice, but why can't they all be good practice? If we share the information. This is a very interesting point about surgeries, that we're talking about waiting lists and 7 million waiting or thereabouts. We're talking about infection rates. In some specialties they're quite low, in other specialties higher. But the way I think about it is, it doesn't matter if you've got a 0.6% infection rate in your specialty, because that's 100% for the patient. And that's not acceptable. We can't have infections in the first 30 days. We have to do something about it. And it includes patients in the decision-making process. We're very passionate about how patients feel and how their experiences after surgery. And I think that's critical, because we can't keep doing what we're doing and expect different results. I think that's the definition for something else. Let me introduce you to Patricia, who is our patient, who's had an interesting journey, and I'm going to let her talk about it. Patricia, please.
Do I have to stand up?
You can sit down and talk if you want.
Well, I have to say, first of all, Miss Rachel is a fantastic surgeon, and power hands. And before I had my surgery, I was very anxious and nervous, and she made me feel calm and talked me through everything. And even when I was in the operating room, she said, everything will be okay, and she was there when I woke up. And she followed everything through. And after I went home, it was a week or two, I think it was, and then you asked me to do post-op. And knowing I'm absolutely rubbish at technical things, she taught me how to do the app. And it's so simple, and oh my goodness, it takes all your anxiety away. It is fantastic. You just put in, if you've got a question, you get it answered, you stop feeling nervous. You don't feel like you've got to contact your doctor, you don't feel like you've got to contact the hospital. There's someone there all the time. my favourite thing of the whole app is the little winky emoji at the end of it. You just you're like, well done, you've done today's thing. I found taking photographs of my gallbladder scar quite hard, but Dr. Chindu was saying that he's changed the way they do it now, so that would be easier. I tell everybody about it because I really truly believe this will save a lot of money for the NHS. And Miss Reiku could monitor me remotely, and you had me come back in for another operation, and because of the photographs, and I had to have, was it negative pressure dressings? And she monitored all of that for me. It was really long and awful to get better, but because I had the app, I felt like there was, I felt like I was listened to, and I didn't need to go to the doctors and go, why won't you give me an appointment? I really need to see someone. Because all I had to do was type in a little message going, I'm really worried about this, is this normal? And there's a whole big list of doctors, and one of them would reply to you. You could find what a doctor is, you could find anything you needed to worry about. It's on the app. If you weren't sure, I could ring Miss Reifu's secretary or my doctors, and they would be able to answer things. Dr. Chindu's fantastic. We've had lovely talks, haven't we? And I feel honoured to be here, to be asked to be here, because all I did was be a patient, and you did the hard work, and you did most of the work with your magic hands, and I can't say thank you enough. And our hospital is great. We're lucky at Kettering General. So I personally think everybody should have post-op, and you're very clever to have invented this, and it will help people. It helped me, and I'm quite an anxious person. So thank you very much, and thank you too.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's very important we listen to patients, which is one of the reasons I invited Patricia here. I was quite aware that this is a surgical meeting, and a lot of us here are very few patients. Yeah, I think you're probably the only patient I know here, so thank you very much for coming. Can I just also introduce you to Ms. Adriana Reiku, who is a consultant general surgeon at Kettering General Hospital, who's kind enough to say a few words as well.
Absolutely. I knew that when I first met you, that's quite a while ago, and this opportunity with Patricia, it was just the right thing at the right place, because I needed to follow you, needed to follow up, and I was going away on annual leave, and it just happened. So I think Patricia just talked for ourselves. It is an amazing app. It's what I need to follow up my patients. I do general surgery, and I do a lot of day case surgery, and in day case surgery you don't follow up your patients. You just tell them if you have a problem, call the GP or go back to my secretary, and sometimes we get them back. It's easy, offers reassurance, yeah. It's what I need. It's what I need to be in contact with my patient, and to offer that patient-centered care that we all talk about. It's simple. And coming from someone that I'm not very used to technology, which is me, and me, hearing that is simple to be used, it's something, yeah. Effective, simple.
Thank you. Thanks, Adriana. So I'll stand up, please. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming, because I'm very aware that as a patient it's very difficult to come and talk about your experience, particularly when it's in the recent past. And one of the most important and most difficult things as a surgeon is to talk about your complications. So, Adriana, thank you so much for coming here. It encourages an honest conversation with our patients. This is what we should be doing a lot more of. What I find disturbing is digital transformation that tries to exclude our patients from a conversation. I think digital transformation should actually be about including patients in the conversation. It shouldn't be about just pathways, taking them to a destination. It is adding value to that pathway. It's actually talking about the patient experience in that pathway. The future of patient care and patient surgery, I think, is a mix of hybrid, digital, and real-time world care, where we use digital tools such as this to give us some time. You know, we don't get much time with increasing workload we have. And one thing I know about capacity and planning for capacity is whatever you plan for, it gets filled up. So maybe we should try doing something slightly differently. Maybe tap into the biggest resource we have in our ecosystem, the patients. They outnumber us. Let's leverage their help. Thank you. I'm sure you will have questions, so I suppose I'm here to take them. Any questions?
Any questions? My name is Asna, I'm a surgical registrar. It's just a comment, and I would like to hear your perspective as well. It's a very good app, I appreciate. It's been 4 years I'm working in the UK, and in my experience, what I've seen is most of the time we're making decisions as in like patient would put a complaint, let's just do this, or investigate in this way. So I mean, from a medical legal perspective, and I'm sorry to say, but we're practicing defensive medicine. So how do you see that post-op, I mean, this particular thing would help in like taking care of this medical legal perspective? Do you think that would reduce the number of the complaints that you get, or?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Whether this increases our defensive risk, risk as it is. Well, the way I look at it is, I'm here to treat patients. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. The best policy I've adopted in the years of practice I've had is put my hands up if I made a mistake, have an honest conversation, take responsibility for it. It may not always be the most desirable outcome for myself, but the one thing I've learned is to always listen to patients. And I don't mean that in a cliche sort of way, because it seems to be the best way to get out of a sticky situation, is to listen. Tools such as this should encourage that information sharing. Because from a patient's point of view, think about it like this. We know exactly what the surgical pathway is. We have windows of opportunity where we see patients. They come, they see us in clinic, the patient has no such oversight. The more information they have, the more they understand what we're talking about. If a mistake is made, I think sharing that information early on and being as honest as possible allows them to also help with the solution. It takes away a lot of the complaints, I feel, because it's now a collaborative process. And who knows, one day you could be speaking up here with your patient and saying, look, we had a problem, we fixed it. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Jacob Akro, retired consultant surgeon. Your app is very interesting, and it's reassuring to hear that your patients like it. Now, I'm assuming that there will be patients who will ask questions that the app can't answer. And in such circumstances, what's the reaction time from when the patient asks a question on the app to getting a response?
I don't know is the answer. The response time is dependent on the response time of the surgeon or clinician, whoever is looking at the question, so to speak. Let me tell you what, this is a tool that you can use as a patient to communicate. Now, if I don't choose to communicate with the patient, I don't, right? the patient may say, well, I've put my message on here and I've tried to contact you, you haven't responded to me. That's my problem. You know, I need to speak to the patient. It gives patients an opportunity to discuss with their clinical teams, because one of the reasons I'm passionate about the messaging tool in this app, and which is something that I've been advised not to perhaps put in the app, was this is 2022. If I have surgery and if I have a problem, I have only 3 options. I wake up in the morning at 8 o'clock, call my GP, try and get an appointment between 8 and 8:30. If I don't get it, I turn up at UCC. Second option is contact my clinical team, try and get an appointment. If I don't get it in a week's time, I go to A&E. The third option I have is walk straight to A&E. I mean, this is not acceptable. This is why I feel opening up means of communication is not a detrimental thing. It is a good thing.
Thank you. I think we have got one more. I think we can afford to take last couple of questions from the floor.
Patricia actually can answer.
Oh, sorry, Patricia would like to answer that question better perhaps.
She was in this situation and it was less than 24 hours.
Every time I asked the question, I got an answer within 24 hours. I never had to wait any longer than 24 hours. So,
yeah, I mean, sometimes it is not possible to be that.
But
yeah.
I had my mind at ease within 24 hours.
Fantastic.
So I was lucky.
Thank you very much for this talk. This application is brilliant, to be honest with you. But to avoid other problems in terms of delay in response and taking the responsibility, do you think that this application should be enrolled in the daily work of on-call register? Because you cannot be on call for 24 hours answering or looking at the application for all your patients. Can you be enrolled in kind of the post-operative part or back when each day case unit when the patient goes home, use the application. If you have any questions, put it in here. We have a team dedicated to look at this application regularly, inform the consultant. So this is one aspect I will ask about. The other aspect, to enroll such a thing in HSS, and NHS is not an easy. You need to look after patient confidentiality. If this application covers this point.
So I'll answer both questions. The first question is about, if I understand correctly, is can we fit this into our SOPs or standard operating procedures? Yes. So in orthopedics, we have clinical nurse specialists or enhanced recovery nurses or staff who manage patients. At the moment, they have a hotline telephone that patients can access once they're discharged. The problem with that is you can't answer the phone all the time. And it also disturbs you when you're on the drug round, etc. This is a transparent way of leaving a message that the nurses or whoever is managing that can look at and triage the calls and get back to them. You will eventually get back to answering the messages. Once you start answering messages, generally there are no further questions. And the most important thing is the patients don't have to go to A&E or book a GP appointment to get those answers. Right? In answer to your second question about data protection and how does this fit in with the NHS data protection policy, I mean, it's a moot question because to roll something out of the NHS, we have to have the highest standards of data protection. We comply with all the GDPR standards, and we cannot roll out anything like this without having everything in place. We're quite confident and quite happy with our security stance, and we make sure that all the data protection is in place. In fact, our servers are on Microsoft Azure, which is where the NHS also have kept their servers. So, yeah. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. I'm going to allow one last question for this session. After that, you'll be joining the session to close. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just curious of the financial model of it. So do you charge the patients to use the app, or the consultants, or the trusts? Or how does it get funded?
Money question. It's very simple. We charge £7,500 a year per department. Nothing else. There's no per surgery, there's no per surgeon, there's no per nothing. We charge a one-off £10,000 fee initially because it pays for the license, for the proms and things like that. But otherwise, £7,500 per department per year in the NHS. One of the things that I'm quite aware of, because I grew up in the NHS, is digital tools are there to support us and help us deliver better care. It shouldn't put unnecessary strain on our revenue budgets, and this is quite key to what we want to roll out.
Thank you very much. Take a pause for our speakers for this afternoon. Thank you very much. May I ask you to take all your belongings with you, that includes the empty cups, any papers, programs, and what's wrong. Thank you.